Good to have you back for this interview on Africa 24. Today we'll be receiving on set Mrs. Kanayo Awani. She's the Vice-présidente of the African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank, on the occasion of the first ever Africa-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum here in Barbados. Thanks for joining us, Mrs.
Thanks
Awani.
for having me.
So you are taking part in the first ever Africa-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum. Can you tell us about your vision for boosting ties between Africa and the Caribbean to reinforce trade between both regions?
Yes, we decided to convene this forum as a way to connect Africa to the Caribbean. We understood that the structures of our trade are the same. The characteristics of both regions are the same. We have a shared history, shared culture, and we imagine that we also have a shared unified destiny. So we decided to host it, also building on the African Union intentions and ambitions. There had been an inaugural summit here in 2021. Subsequently, we started having engagements. My president visited Barbados, and that's where we birthed the idea of the Africa-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum. And today, we're excited that it's come to pass. It's a platform, and it's a start. It's a platform to connect buyers and sellers of goods and services. It's a platform to connect investors to investment opportunities, people in the two areas. It's a platform also to consummate or to even begin to dialogue. It integrates the public and the private sector. And I think we have it somewhere when we said we are pursuing a public and private sectors to coordinate the development of the two regions. The vision, is to see exactly that happen, to see trade and investments grow between the two regions, to see us exploring opportunities in the two regions, to see how we can benefit from and ourselves as Afreximbank enabling and facilitating the trade, for our shared prosperity.
So, Mrs. Awani, since the last Afreximbank AGM in Cairo, can you tell us have you noted any progress in trade and access to trade finance on the continent?
Since the AGM in June?
Yes, in June.
Not June.
Have you noted any progress in terms of trade or access to trade finance?
No, well, I can only tell you what we're doing because right now everybody is reeling from the adverse effects of, soon after we came out from the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, the Ukraine crisis started. So most of the things that we're doing as Afreximbank is to introduce as part of a mandate at a DFI, we try to resolve crises, try to see how our clients can adjust to shocks that emanate from things like the pandemic and crisis from the likes that we have of the Ukraine crisis. So in that space, what we'll be trying to do as a bank is to see how we can support our clients, support African states, to adjust to the effects of those crises, adjust to liquidity constraints, trade constraints, supply chain disruptions, especially around food, fertilizer, and fuel on the African continent by launch, we had earlier in the year launched a 4 billion Ukraine crisis facility to deal with those shocks. And all we've done is that we've seen a growth in the transaction pipeline, drawing from that.
So talking about the AFCFTA, this agreement had been launched officially in January 2021, but there are reports that it has not really been fully implemented. Trade under this agreement has not really started. Can you tell us about the sluggishness, what accounts for this sluggishness, and what can be done to address the situation? And
I think there is negotiations. Right now they've advanced in the tariff offers, rules of origin. There are negotiations to be done because you're talking about 55 African countries who are having to negotiate, making offers, tariff offers, rules of origin, and so I think that's normal, in the scheme of things. And what we are doing at Afreximbank is to see how the implementation is progressed. you know, while those negotiations are going on. You know, putting building blocks, by the way. For instance, one of the things we've done is to introduce an adjustment fund, you know, AFCFTA adjustment fund. So working with AFCFTA and at the mandate of the African Union, heads of state, is to put in place that fund that will enable African states, you know, adjust to revenue losses as a result of the liberalization. So that work is going on. So I'm trying to say that there are building blocks of things that are going on to support African states begin to, and not just the African. That fund, for instance, is not just for the public sector, governments. Yes, it will support them, but it also support the private sector. Some private firms may need to retool, expand their capacity, you know, redirect their machinery, you know, and equipment to be able to compete in and be able to trade in the AFCFTA, under the AFCFTA regime. There are other initiatives that we've also introduced to support the AFCFTA implementation. You know, for instance, working with the AU and the AFCFTA, we've also introduced an automotive strategy. You know, because remember that we're trying to also see how we can expand value chains on the continent, and that AFCFTA enables us to do that. The growth in intra-African trade is, and focusing on intra-African trade gives us a unique opportunity to industrialize. So that's happening. We introduced that strategy, and we're also, you know, presenting them and negotiating that strategy as a common African continental strategy for automotive, you know, and that's going on right now. What's the point I'm trying to make? The point, and we're also trying to do the same thing for the textiles so that the value chains are expanded across the continent. I think there's also the Pan-African payment and settlement system. Exactly. You know, these are things that we introduced to support, you know, the AFCFTA. And there are a couple of other, KYC, MANSA, know your customer, due diligence repository that will allow investors to invest in Africa because we have a repository of KYC information to support intra-African trade and even extra-African trade. Trade information portal, trade regulation portals that will allow businesses to be able to get access to information, you know, to be able to do business within the context of the AFCFTA. So all of those are going on. It may be seen as little progress, but I think there is significant progress that's been made in those areas.
So let's come back to the Pan-African payment and settlement system that Afreximbank launched early 2022. Where are we with this system that aims at boosting trade with local currency to improve intra-African trade? So
commercial transactions were launched in February this year. As you probably know, we are piloting it in the West African monetary zone. That's where the pilot is going between the, you know, so we've, it has been launched, it's going on, and what we're trying to do now is to see how we can rope in other countries to join the system.
So the intra-African trade fair will take place in Abidjan.
Yes.
Can you tell us what should we expect from this trade fair that aims at boosting intra-African trade?
Well, again, another platform, you know, to connect buyers and sellers, to connect investments and investment opportunities, to promote intra-African trade. You know, it's a veritable platform to integrate public and private sector discuss. We have it to hold in Abidjan in November next year, as you rightly said. Where the last one had about 33,000 participants, half of which were virtual and half of which were physical. It probably was the biggest physical gathering, you know, last year. So we're going to, this year we're expecting, you know, more of this. Next year we're expecting more of the same. We're expecting deals to be closed. Last year we closed 42 billion worth of deals. This time around we're expecting about 45, and those deals are being tracked, you know, to enable to see how we can grow intra-African trade. So it's the preparations are ongoing now. We're hoping that we'll meet the targets, you know, next year.
So, ma'am, throughout the sessions of this conference, we've been talking about implicating the youth in the AFCFTA, boosting entrepreneurship to spur development. Can you tell us how effectively youth-led initiatives can be supported on the continent, especially in terms of finance, as a trade finance institution?
It's the same conversation I was having earlier about the SMEs and how we have introduced an SME development program in the bank, because we recognize that SMEs will, are the backbone of the economies. They employ 70% of people you know, they are the drivers of every economy, and you need to integrate them. You need to include them. And that inclusiveness will include youth, it includes women, and that's the focus of the AFCFTA as well. You know, youth-led businesses, women-led businesses to be included. And we're supporting them, like I said in an earlier interview, you know, we're not supporting them with just financing, but it's an ecosystem of solutions, including capacity building, and technical, providing some forms of technical assistance, you know, so that they can be able to, you know, benefit from our financing solutions. One of the things we're talking at, and at the trade fair as well, you know, that we have a youth entrepreneurship program. I don't know, you know, where we have one of the pillars of the intra-African trade is actually a youth entrepreneurship pavilion. In that, it's almost like an incubation hub that we promote, you know, working with the African Union and AE Trade, you know, to promote that pillar of the trade fair. Within the bank also, you may also know that the creatives are a huge part of our strategy and the work we do on Afreximbank. And it's also, you know, being implemented under the intra-African trade division, which I lead, you know. So, you know, this creative intervention has been born out of the fact that we recognize the importance of the youth, you know, and we're taking cognizance of the youth bulge on the continent, you know, and the demographics, but also not just the youth bulge, but also the talents, the abundance of talents in those youths, you know. So what we're trying to do with our creative strategy is to see how those talents can be monetized, how youths can find employment, can be empowered. And that element, and the elements of our youth strategy involves film, music, arts and craft, fashion, and sports. Again, as I mentioned with the SME development program, it's not just about financing as well. So we will do, what we're trying to do is to close certain gaps, you know, which is what we try to do, you know, to complement, to close certain gaps that we find, the gap of finance, you know, in the creative sector, the gap of skills, capacity skills. So one of the things we do is to run master classes, is to help support, you know, many, a few educational activities that we've supported so far, even in songwriting. You may have heard of our cookout master class, where we're supporting young creatives who are into songwriting, because we want to monetize the value chain of the music sector, so that those who are writing the songs can also make money. The idea being that music that come out of that cookout master class can be published, and the contributors to the music also get to the song or get royalties as well. You know, we also support filling the gap of intellectual property issues, you know, weak intellectual property, which is, you know, in the creative sector, that's huge in intellectual property issues. So we're working with the African Union on certain initiatives around that area, you know, and finally also the gap of market access. How do these creatives get access to markets so that they can make money out of it? So for instance, in the fashion sector, what I'm trying to do is to touch on a few things, the various on the fashion interventions. We are supporting African and Caribbean designers, by the way, and the general diaspora, you know, to Portugal Fashion Show, for instance, that is held in the city of Porto twice a year. You know, we're supporting that. In March, we supported 40 Africans, you know, and from Africa and the diaspora and the Caribbean, St. Vincent and Grenadine, to go and showcase their brands in Portugal. And what has done is that that has caught the attention of the Paris Fashion Show. And next month, we're also supporting a group of 20 fashion designers to Paris Fashion Show to expose them to brands abroad.
That was it for this interview. Thank you for watching. We have more programs coming up on Africa 24.